Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be saving a betta fish. Everybody meet Jeff. This is actually my girlfriend's betta fish who I am watching over for the next week while she's away in London. She decided that I was responsible enough to take care of her fish for a while, go figure. But it's kind of a funny story. She actually got this fish a couple of weeks ago and didn't tell me right away. And I think that's because she thought that I would be super overbearing in the process and, you know, tell her how to do things. She likes to do things her own way, and, you know, I totally don't blame her for probably thinking that. But now that I have Jeff alone to myself for a while, we're going to be doing a huge makeover here on his little setup because, you know, this is sort of the typical thing that most people do when they get a betta fish for the first time, and it's not ideal. We have the peace lily here in the middle, which, you know, pretty standard stuff. That's a common thing for people to do. It's advertised a lot, and it is good for the fish, you know, but there are some things that aren't really great about this type of, you know, vase setup. So we're gonna go ahead and do a full makeover on Jeff's setup here and get him something that's gonna have more stable water conditions that are just overall better for him. They're really gonna help his longevity, and he's really gonna appreciate them. I think most people think that you can get a betta fish and keep him in something like this and, you know, it's totally fine, which, you know, the fish isn't gonna die being in a bowl in a small volume like this. You've all seen, you know, how they spend a lot of time at Petco or PetSmart in those tiny little jars. This is a big upgrade from that, but this still isn't quite ideal for the fish. The biggest thing is temperature. The lack of water movement in this tank is okay. These fish experience somewhat close to that in the wild, but the fact that this thing isn't temperature controlled is a little bit of a problem. So the fact that the temperature, you know, is whatever it is inside the house, it can vary from, you know, probably 64 to 70 something degrees, depending on, you know, the time of year and whether or not the heat's on. And that's not ideal, because if your betta fish is hanging out in, you know, 64-degree water, they're going to be lethargic. They're not going to eat as much. They're not going to, you know, be moving around and doing the things that you want them to do. So an easy way to fix that is just by increasing the temperature with a small heater, which we have over here in our kit, which I'll talk about in a second. But you could easily just pop a little heater in here and fix that, but we want to take it a step further. So here we just have a few things, I'll talk about each one of them, that are going to make a huge difference in Jeff's behavior and his longevity. So obviously we start here with the 2.5 gallon tank. Now I know a lot of people think that, you know, a 5-gallon aquarium is the minimum that you should keep a betta in, but, you know, 2.5 is fine too. You don't need to go super huge. I asked my girlfriend a few days ago, you know, before she left, if Jeff could get a 5-gallon tank, because I thought that would be perfect, but she wants to stick with something small. You know, she's not going to be happy that she's going to lose the vase, but this is still small enough to where, you know, it'll fit in her kitchen, on her windowsill, wherever she wants to keep it. And I'm hoping that she doesn't, you know, get too mad at me for changing things up. So we got the tank, and then we got a few other things in here. Links to all of this stuff will be down in the description if you have a betta setup that you want to upgrade. We'll go through all of these things as we go through the setup, and you can see here we also have some rocks and stuff down here. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with the first thing we're gonna do, which is modify the 2.5 gallon aquarium. So the first thing I'm gonna do is take the rims off of this little tank. This is totally optional. You don't have to do it. It's something that I do to pretty much all the tanks that are of a reasonable size. So the way I do that is, on a small tank like this, all you need to do is grab a box cutter and go very carefully under each rim, making sure not to press any metal part of the box cutter on the glass. We don't want to get any scratches. But just get that blade up there all the way to the top until you feel it hit the top of the rim, and go all the way around that rim. And then you do the same thing on the inside. The top rim is usually a little bit more tough to get off than the bottom rim, which you'll see here in a second, just because there's silicone that's up on top of the piece of glass that touches this portion of the rim that you can't get the razor blade on. You'll notice that as I'm cutting the silicone, that the rim starts to crack and pieces break off. That's totally normal with a smaller tank like this that has such a fragile rim on it. Just take your time and go extra slow, and be careful because, again, tanks like this that have super thin glass are really easy to break, and so if you go too quick and make too many quick moves, you can end up breaking the tank and hurting yourself. So just be extra careful if you decide to go this route. Again, it's not for everyone. So once you go around the tank and you get most of it, you'll then just use your hands to wiggle the brace a little bit, and you should start to feel it coming up. Taking the bottom rim off is a lot easier because we don't have that portion that the razor blade can't get to. So this piece is easily removed, and it just takes about a minute to do. Now, once you get the rims off, you're gonna have a bunch of residual silicone on there, and that's super easily removed by just taking a fresh razor blade and scraping away at it. Not having a rim on a tank this size isn't going to be a problem when it comes to holding the water in the aquarium, but if you're going to be picking this thing up and moving it around, you don't want to have it filled with water, again, because the glass on this thing is so thin. So just keep that in mind, and if you're going to be moving the tank, make sure that you take at least half the water out before you move it around too much. Let's finally scape this tank, guys. So here I have some Monterey Beach sand, which is left over from, a lot of the other tanks that I do. I like this stuff really, really well, and I think it's gonna look a little bit more natural than this orange colored gravel that Jeff has in his bowl. So all I do is add the sand to the tank, pretty straightforward, and I shape it so that there's a little bit higher sand in the back just to give things a little bit more of a completed look. This stuff is pre-washed, of course. If you're using new stuff from the pet store, you want to wash that out really well before you put it in the tank, but that's already done, so we don't have to worry about it. And then once that's in, now we can start to add in some of the essential things to the tank that are going to help make the water a lot more safe for our betta fish here. The first thing we're going to be adding is a Tetra HT30 submersible heater, and this is actually a little bit of overkill. I ordered the 50-watt version of this, which is meant for tanks that are 2 to 10 gallons, and it's going to be, I think, a little bit better. Use less power, at least, in this little tank, but we're going to use this in the meantime. This is going to help to keep the water temperature at a perfect temperature for Jeff. It's supposed to keep the water temperature at about 78 degrees based on, which model you're using and how many gallons your little tank is. So that should do the trick there. Next, I'm going to be adding a small filter to the tank. And this is the thing that, pretty much every betta bowl or whatever you want to call it is lacking, and this is going to make a huge difference for Jeff. She's not going to have to worry about changing the water as often. Ammonia spikes shouldn't be an issue. This little thing should be, perfect for this size tank and for just Jeff in here. And I think it's going to really make things just a lot easier overall, a little bit less maintenance, not having to change the water as much, and you don't have to worry as much about having ammonia problems. I really like this little AquaTop filter though. I think it's perfect for these smaller tanks. It's got a nice little spray bar here, so we get a little bit of water movement, across the top of the aquarium. That's my goal, at least. Prevent, a bunch of water surface agitation from happening. We don't, if we put a pump in here that was any stronger than this, it might be too much current for the betta, and he wouldn't like that, but I think this one's going to work out really good. It's also got a filter sponge in the compartment here. Jeff should really like that. So now it's time to scape our little tank here, guys, and what I want to do is I want to use the peace lily that was in Jeff's bowl already. What I did was I fed it through this piece of driftwood that had the big hole in it, and I think that looks really cool. So we're going to go ahead and set that in this corner here, and that heater is just going to be too big. So as soon as that smaller heater comes in, I'm going to be really happy to get this big thing out of here. But I think we still have enough room here if we can get that to stay put. And that's going to sort of be the focal point of the tank. And I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks good. What we're also going to do is add in this dragon stone. So let's take this big piece here and maybe hide part of the filter. We got a few more pieces here that we can use. Cover that up a little bit. That blends in well, I think. Put some over here. And this is just the start. I'll go through and rework this a little bit, but we don't have a lot of room here, as you can tell, in this little tiny tank. But I think, something like that would look pretty good. What do you guys think? Let me know. The last thing to go in this aquarium, guys, are going to be these Marimo moss balls. So you guys are probably, you probably know all about these things. They sell them at Petco, PetSmart. You know, they're just balls of algae. They're actually not, you know, a true moss at all. They're an algae and they're super hardy. They don't need a ton of light. I think they're gonna be perfect in this aquarium, and I think she's gonna really like these things. So this big one we have here, I think I'm gonna leave, and then we have 3 little small ones. So all you have to do is place them around where you think you want them, and obviously we can move them super easily. Let's take this big one and put it right there in front. There we go. I'm really hoping that the peace lily does well in this tank. I'm not 100% sure, you know, just because of the limited amount of compact sand substrate that's in here. We'll see how that does, but the moss balls should do really well, help to keep the nitrogen levels a little bit lower in the tank, and pair that with our new filter, and I think this is gonna create just an awesome little environment for Jeff that's a lot more safe compared to his bowl. So all we have to do now is put in some tap water into the tank, fill it up a little bit, and then top it off with the water that's already in Jeff's bowl here, and then we'll transfer him over and get him into his new tank. Jeff is already loving his new home, guys. He is already moving around way more than he did in the bowl, and I'm super excited to see kind of what he does over this next week while I still have him. I forgot to mention earlier, we also have a little digital thermometer here that I just hooked up, reading 74.3, and it's on its way up, again, hopefully to somewhere close to 78 degrees, but this is a really good option. You know, minimally intrusive compared to something as big as this on a tank this small, so that's going to be perfect. The only thing that's really missing from this tank is any sort of a light, and you know, you could get yourself like a little Phoenix clip light, a little clip LED, or any LED for that matter. It doesn't need to be one that's, you know, meant for growing plants, because honestly there's nothing in this tank that really requires it. Again, this tank is going to be sitting in my girlfriend's kitchen or like on her windowsill, wherever she kind of moves it around, but you know, so there's no need for a light, but that's sort of like the last thing that you could get is just a little clip LED. That's definitely an option you have. The filter actually is moving quite a bit of water, and I'm not sure if I'm going to stick with it in this tank because it's so small. This same filter on a 5-gallon tank I think would be perfect, but just based on how much it's moving the water, and you know, Jeff, based on his behavior so far, it hasn't been that much, but he's kind of staying out of this area where the water is coming down and circulating in the aquarium, so might take that out, not sure yet. If you guys remember from the beginning of the video, there was the big siphon in here, and I got this just kind of as an impulse buy, a little self-starting siphon, not really required for a tank this small. You can easily go in with a big cup and do your water changes like that, but I thought it was just a nice little add-on. I think that's gonna do it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Saving a betta fish, getting him out of the bowl and into a little mini planted aquarium. This was a fun little project for me, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you learned something new. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and hit that notification bell so you know the exact time that I upload the next video. Thanks again so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time. Say bye, Jeff.